Happy Friday the 13th, everyone. We're going to do what any good horror fan should be doing on this kind of day, and that's watching a movie marathon. So let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Cocktail Corner. I am James of Cigar and Bar, and today is Friday the 13th. Today isn't actually Friday the 13th. I'm recording this on the Thursday, and it has me wondering about how safe it is to be celebrating Friday the 13th on a day that's not Friday the 13th. And for the more superstitious of you out there, you'll know why. The sun is rapidly setting, so before the stars come out and the serial killers start slashing people, let's make ourselves a drink. We're going to be making a drink today that I call a Crystal Lake Swizzle, and we're going to be going from here and we're going to be going over some of the movies in the Friday the 13th series. So we're going to make a cocktail, and then following that, there's going to be a spoiler alert in effect for any of you who haven't seen the movies. So let's start building our drink. Today's drink is an excuse to use an ingredient I've had in my fridge for a while now, and that is some Crystal Pepsi. I'm going to be doing a thing on Crystal Pepsi at a later date just to give you some more details about it, about its interesting history, but today we're just going to put it in the drink. Lots of bottles tend to expand when they've been around for a while. This one is kind of imploded, so I'm not really sure what that means, but we'll find out. Also, it doesn't really matter if this is still very carbonated because we're going to be swizzling it around anyway. So let's just give a quick taste test here to this very flat, dated bottle of Crystal Pepsi. Smells kind of like Pepsi. It also smells a little bit like 7-Up, so I don't know what to expect from this. Okay, that's Pepsi. That's definitely Pepsi. That's weird. So we're going to start off our drink here with 6 ounces of Crystal Pepsi. And we're going to make it a little moodier because this is nice crystal clear, Crystal Lake Pepsi here, but it never looks this clear in the movie. So it's always murky and dark and scary. So we're going to add some good old black Sambuca to this beverage. Now, just a side note, if you're making this drink at home, you don't need Crystal Pepsi and black Sambuca. You can achieve the same effect with regular Pepsi and clear Sambuca. To this, we are going to add a half an ounce of Angostura bitters. Sambuca is a big flavor, and it needs something that it can hold up against. So we need to have some nice strong bitters in here. And then because we are talking about camp blood here, we're going to include a half an ounce of blood orange juice. Let's make that a whole ounce. That'll be a bit better. We're going to give this a little bit of citrus bitterness with about a half an ounce of lemon juice. And then just to round out the flavor a little bit, we're going to settle in with a half an ounce of gin. I'm using my favorite Bombay Sapphire for this one. That looks murky and treacherous, as it should. Now I can think of nothing better to mix this up in than a Geeky Tiki's Jason Voorhees Tiki mug, which is why I ordered one. Unfortunately, it didn't arrive. So we're going to go with a Michael Myers Tiki, which is the one that I do have. Thanks for nothing, Amazon. We're going to take our lovely cocktail here, pour it into our Tiki mug, which is filled with ice. And then it's not called a swizzle for nothing. We're going to take a bar spoon and we're going to insert it spoon side down into the ice, and we're going to swizzle it. Now you can do this with a bar spoon, or traditionally, properly, this would be accomplished with a boiling a wooden swizzle stick that was grown specifically to the shape required. And for a little bit of Friday the 13th magic, we are going to include a hockey mask in this drink. So, there you go. That's the best I can do. Let's give it a taste. It is very anise forward, and anything less than a half an ounce Angostura bitters is not going to be able to hold up to all that flavor. But with the blood orange sweetness and a little bit of tartness from the lemon and a little bit of depth of flavor, the floral nature of the gin, this really is quite a flavorful drink, and it comes across like a cherry cola. A little more of a licorice flavored cherry cola, but a cherry cola nonetheless. So we're going to take this drink over to our movie theater in the other room, and we're going to do a brief recap of some of the movies while we continue to enjoy our beverage here. So follow along and we'll enjoy some Friday night at the movies. I got my drink. I've got my popcorn, fresh in the movie theater. So let's talk some horror. It goes without saying that we're going to be talking about some films now, so despite the age of the movies, a spoiler alert is now in effect. If you don't want to know anything about these movies, so we'll be revealing some things, then please don't keep watching ahead. Now, Friday the 13th is a seminal work that came out in 1980, one of the very first of the teenager massacre gore slasher flicks, and at least one of the most popular. The big three, in my opinion, being Friday the 13th, Halloween, and Nightmare on Elm Street series. This is one of the big ones. This movie is a good example of something that I was taught when I was in my Cinema of Horror course at college, which was that sometimes you need to try and watch a movie as though you know nothing about it. The most popular example I can think of for that one is Psycho. When you watch Psycho and you pretend you've never seen it before and you try to think of only what you can guess based on what you've seen in the movie so far, you need to decide at what point do you think this isn't going to be a movie about a woman who steals some money from her employer. Because eventually it becomes a movie where a woman gets stabbed to death in a shower, and that's just part of cinema history at this point. But people going into that the first time didn't know that. They didn't know that the movie was going to take a rapid turn after you'd seen this one character's story for so long. Same thing with Friday the 13th. We know that in Friday the 13th, Jason Voorhees is the killer, or Jason Voorhees is at least the impetus behind the killings. We don't know that it's going to be a movie about a woman who gets stabbed in the shower. It's easy nowadays when we go back to watch Psycho to think that it's a movie about a woman who gets stabbed in the shower, and then we get surprised that there's all this drama about stealing money that occurs in the movie. Kind of hard to figure out, what you're supposed to be thinking about it. But with Friday the 13th, it's kind of the opposite, because you think of Jason Voorhees being the killer, which is heavily implied in the first movie, until you get to the end and you realize that the murderer is actually Betsy Palmer, who plays Jason Voorhees' mother, who is getting revenge on the camp counselors who will let her son die. Notable in this first movie, first silver screen appearance of one Kevin Bacon, who now loathes this role, and just gets weirded out whenever people ask him to sign pictures of his dead body from this movie. Friday the 13th Part 2 opens somewhat where the first movie left off, where we see the sole survivor of the first movie, the one who actually killed Betsy Palmer's Pamela Voorhees in the first movie, is now suffering from some post-traumatic stress and is then hunted down and killed by Jason, who, as we understand, witnessed his mother's murder, and now we've got a reversal. The first movie, we're looking at Jason's mother taking revenge for her son's death, and now we've got Jason taking revenge for his mother's death. So it gets a little odd, I'll give you that. Second movie is kind of a rehash of the first movie, and it reminds me a lot of Evil Dead 2, in that it tries to set up the same movie, but we've still got the vestiges of the first movie mucking up what we expect the plot to do. So it's kind of fun, the way they do that. Second movie, though, is lacking one critical element that we expect from any Friday the 13th movie, which is the hockey mask. Hockey masks are important. Hockey masks are what make Jason Jason in today's pop culture references. That doesn't come in this movie. In this movie, he simply wears a pillowcase over his head. It's all very anticlimactic and ends with a lot of very simple first-year psychology. Not a bad film, but as you're going to see, 2, 3, and 4 are kind of all blended together in their narrative. So let's jump ahead to part number 3. Friday the 13th, part 3. Now things are getting good. If I'm being honest, this is my favorite Friday the 13th movie. If I'm being more honest, I actually really like 6 and 10 as well, but we'll get to those ones. Part 3 here is great. It follows in the tradition of a couple of other films whose third installments became known as the 3D version of those movies. The ones that come to mind are Halloween 3, which was Season of the Witch, which the less said about it, the better. It was kind of a 3D, and the other one was Jaws. Jaws 3D was one that had a lot of really awful 3D special effects, and in my opinion, is the worst Jaws movie. Far worse than Jaws 4. And if you want to argue that in the comment section if I do Jaws movie night. We'll do that sometime if you want. Now this movie picks up where the last one left off, insofar as Jason has just been injured by the surviving final girl of the second movie, and now he needs to make his way to where he can get back into the fray. So he's got some people to kill, he's got some food to eat, and he's got some victims to find. Along the way in this 3D installment of Friday the 13th, Jason will kill the owner of a local bodega and his wife. He will terrorize and kill a bunch of teenagers at a cottage. He will slaughter a biker gang. And he will find his iconic hockey mask. And just so many elements of this movie. Some of it's over the top, and some of it is just really funny and really suspenseful. I love this one. It fits neatly after 2 was being a little bit serious at the end with the psychology of the final girl appearing to Jason as his mother. It's a little bit lighter for a horror film, and it's a lot of fun. Here we have Friday the 13th, Part 4, The Final Chapter. Now these movies have come out like clockwork. 1980, 1981, 1982, now 1983. And these movies, like I mentioned, 2, 3, and 4 are kind of a continued narrative. And in this one, Jason runs afoul of 2 more kind of tropes in the series. One of them is child makeup prodigy Tommy Jarvis, who is a young kid who's just vacationing with his family up at the cottage, next to a house full of, you guessed it, rowdy teenagers. They're going to get what's coming, right? Always. It always happens. The other person that shows up in this movie is a guy who's looking for his missing sister, who's going around trying to figure out what's going on. That's another trope that's going to be picked up on later. But what's important to note in this one is that Tommy Jarvis, this is the one where Tommy actually kills Jason. And it's called The Final Chapter, not for no reason. They intended this to be the end of Friday the 13th. They thought 4 was good, they weren't going to milk it anymore. And at the end of this movie, when Jason gets incapacitated, as he always does at the end, rather than drop the weapon, walk away tearfully, Tommy Jarvis takes up the machete and hacks Jason to pieces, from which we are led to understand in later movies he never got up from. He never recovered. He was dead. He was buried. So that's the end of Part 4. It's a fun one. Like I said, fits in with 2, 3, 4. And I hope you enjoyed this so far, because now it starts to get hit or miss for the rest of the series. Moving on, we enter one of the low points in this movie franchise. And if you disagree with me, let me know below. This is Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. And in this one, the young Tommy Jarvis is all grown up and is suffering from the after effects mentally of having murdered a serial killer. So he's been institutionalized, and now he's working his way out of the institution into a bit of a halfway house. He still isn't speaking, and he is having hallucinations. Now, what's going on? People start getting killed. The residents are being murdered in very Jason-esque fashions. Is Tommy the one committing these murders? Is Tommy seeing things? Is Jason back? Well, no, Tommy isn't seeing things, and no, Jason isn't back. It's not actually Jason in this one. It turns out that one of the inpatients that was killed at the beginning of the movie was the illegitimate son of the paramedic that came to take away the body, and he swore vengeance on the son that he never admitted to by coming back in the persona of Jason and slowly murdering all of those responsible. Is it a good movie? No. Does it have an interesting end? Kind of. Because after that reveal, we kind of see Tommy start to unravel a little bit more, and there's a question of whether or not he's going to take on the mantle of Jason, wearing a mask and stabbing people, because he's so messed up from his encounter with them all those years ago. Here we are, we finally made it at Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, which is one of my all-time favorite Friday the 13th movies, maybe one of my favorite slasher movies ever. It's lots of fun. It opens with Tommy Jarvis, who's now much better adjusted after dealing with the traumas of having encountered and killed Jason Voorhees. He did not become a killer. He is ready to become a successful member of society again. However, he has one last thing he has to do to get closure, and that's dig up Jason's body so he can be sure that he's dead. Now, in the process of doing so, he loses his head, stabs the body with a giant wrought iron fence post, which then becomes struck by lightning, reanimating the corpse. Yep, we're going with zombie Jason on this one. It's a little bit tired, it's a little bit unbelievable, but it does lead to a lot of fun. So we can somewhat forgive it. But before we go on with the rest of this movie, I need to stop and make another drink, because what's happened now is the town is so sick of having been associated with Jason Voorhees and Crystal Lake and Camp Crystal Lake or Camp Blood that they changed the name of the town to Forest Green. So I am going to take my Crystal Lake Swizzle cocktail, and I am going to remix it with some chartreuse to make a Forest Green Swizzle. And I'm going to have that in my hand right now. So, here it is. I haven't done anything particularly scientific with this one. I just swapped out chartreuse instead of Sambuca, and I omitted the gin and the blood orange. Now, I haven't tried this. This one's a live tasting. We'll see if this one's any good. Surprisingly, it's quite good. Still strong and chartreusey, and it really brings out the pepper. I think the bitterness of the Ango brings out the pepperiness of the chartreuse, and it hides a lot of the sweetness. It's got a little bit of spice. That's nice. That's a Forest Green Swizzle. So for this movie, Tommy Jarvis is running around town trying to stop the resurrected Jason from murdering more people wantonly, but the problem is he's running up against his own reputation as that crazy guy who may have been killing people. So when people start dying, they start suspecting him until it's too late and Jason Voorhees has already taken out most of the irresponsible youths in the city. But I digress. They managed to stop him by tricking him into his Achilles heel, the water that took him down as a child. They trick him into the lake. This is the first time that they trick him into the lake to stop him, but it's not the last time that water will be his downfall. Part 7, The New Blood. This one is one of those forgettable, skippable ones. You can go right from Part 6 to Part 8, and you won't miss a beat. You won't miss anything in between. This one is weird because it involves a girl with telekinesis and weird powers of the mind to raise the dead, or perhaps those that are only mostly dead. It starts off with young girls being brought back to her childhood cabin with her mother and her psychiatrist to deal with the feelings that she has that she was responsible for her father's death when she was a young girl. This gets muddled with the fact that there are teenagers next door who are partying, that she wants to join, the fact that her therapist is obviously trying to exploit her to become famous because she has these telekinetic powers, and eventually we come along to the realization that it wasn't her that killed her father as a child, but it was Jason, who was in the water, who is still in the water, and when she thinks it's her father's presence she's sensing, tries to bring him back and ends up reviving Jason. How do we get rid of him in this one? Well, we use telekinetic powers to drown him in the lake again. It's self-contained, I guess, but it's not very good, and I will fight you on this one. If anyone really likes Part 8, let me know below, and I will fight you on it. Here we are at Friday the 13th, Part 8, a movie so bad it's good. This one really takes us into the pantheon of badness. Jason Takes Manhattan. That's right, the hockey mask killer makes his way to the Big Apple in the 80s. And it's pretty bad. It starts off with a houseboat that accidentally, his anchor knocks loose some power lines that electrify and revivify Jason, who comes back to slaughter those kids before now staying on a boat and going for a pleasure cruise. Goes out into the harbor, gets on a boat full of a graduating class of high school students, and then starts picking them off one by one on the way to Manhattan. Whole thing finishes where the boat sinks, they get to Manhattan, but guess what? Jason survived the boat sinking and he's gotten there with them. Now they're running around back alleys and trying to avoid getting killed by Jason, only to try to escape through the sewers, be told by a sewer worker that toxic waste gets flooded through the sewers every night at midnight, which they then use to their advantage to vanquish Jason yet again, who, for some reason, turns into a child. They don't really explain that part ever, but it's some good old-fashioned so bad that it's good fun, and it's worthy of an inclusion in this particular box set that I've got. But now we need to take a step outside the box set to see our next movie, which is even weirder. The next movie is so bad it didn't even warrant the inclusion of the title of Friday the 13th. The movie is actually titled Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. They did not have permission to use the term Friday the 13th on the movie because they took such a departure. In this movie, Jason is now a demon who possesses people who then act out the Jason-esque murders until he can find his way back into a member of a family that he's blood related to rebirth himself as Jason once again, complete with hockey mask and machete. Don't ask me how. I only saw it once. I don't want to watch it again. If I'm missing something that's worth talking about, let me know, and I'll give it another rewatch. But I don't own it, and I don't intend to own it. Now, as far as weird sci-fi riffs on horror tropes go, Jason X is fairly odd, but I'd say it's one of the purest movies in the Friday the 13th franchise. Now, why do I say that? It's weird. It's very sci-fi. It's Jason in space in the future with spaceships, androids, and amazing automated medical technology. It's bizarre. It's not what you think of when you think of rustic 80s, low-budget, gore, special effects in the woods. And it just takes it to a new place. It does trim it with a lot of the trappings of science fiction, but one thing that it doesn't do is that it doesn't mess with Jason at his core. Jason at his core in this movie is someone who wakes up, finds himself in the future, isn't fazed by it, just keeps killing humans who keep acting like the same old humans. That's all it is. I keep wanting to say it's pure. It's pure to the character. It's exactly what the character would do. There is not a misstep in this movie as far as the tone or the actions of the character. And I would say that is partly due to the actor that played Jason Voorhees, Kane Hodder. This is his fourth and final tour as the masked machete wielder. He first took up the hockey mask to play Jason in The New Blood, and then he was consecutively Jason in Jason Takes Manhattan, The Final Friday, and Jason X. This is a man who was committed to that character and would do things like tell the director, no, Jason wouldn't do that. I'm not doing that. That can't be in your movie. He was committed to keeping the character pure, even though it was a weird landscape for it. So I give that a lot of credit there. Now, one of the things this movie does very well, and some, what it might argue unnecessarily, is it does go on to explain some of the reasons why Jason is Jason, which isn't really necessary in a kind of a supernatural horror sense. You don't need explanation. You don't need to know the whys behind these things. But they talk about how, at the beginning of the movie here, they talk about how Jason, they tried to kill him, they tried to hang him, shoot him, stab him, poison him, drown him. Nothing would work. They could not kill him, and they said it had something to do with his cellular makeup, with his body. Something about his body, something about the deformity that made him ugly enough to be ridiculed as a child, also changed his DNA enough to make it resilient, which it kind of explains why perhaps a lightning strike to a dead body might bring it back to life if you're dealing with some kind of weird, unaccounted for mutation. It's not incredibly believable, but it's internally consistent, and that goes a long way in my books. This one here is one of what I'd call one of the modern era of Friday the 13th, which is a shame because there's really only two worth talking about after this. But prior to this, all of the big ones, all the big names in Friday the 13th came out in the 80s. And it was a different cinema for a different audience. It had different ideas of consistency, different ideas of pacing, and different levels of special effects. And you can do a lot with those, as evidenced by the fact that the series is still as well thought of as it is in a campy cult context. But this one, doing what it can to bring some more modern actors, some more modern visuals, and some, critically needed, some more modern pacing, because while the slow cat and mouse-esque chasing of these teenagers, much like in Halloween where Michael Myers spends a whole movie stalking Laurie Strode, it's just not something we want to watch 10 times. So I was really glad that they took Jason's behavior and his actions and brought it into something a little more watchable for a modern audience. So this one, right up there with 3, which is campy fun with a hockey mask, 6, which is a lot of fun with the revivification, and also just a really funny movie. A lot of the dialogue is very funny. And 10 make my top 3 favorite Friday the 13th movies. Don't ask me to put those in any particular order. 3, 6, 10, they're all good. And I'd stack any one of them up against the other. Now we're going to move on to the last 2 entries in this series. Worthy of a brief note is Freddy vs. Jason, in that it is another movie that includes Jason Voorhees, this time not Kane Hodder. It's another movie where you get to see Jason with some modern pacing and some modern actors and actresses and some modern special effects. Not entirely necessary, but it is nice after the same plotting cat and mouse games. Like I mentioned in the last one, it's good to see this one. And while this is in canon supposed to be actually Jason, it's got an awful lot of Freddy Krueger in it, which is fine in a movie called Freddy vs. Jason, but if you're really just out to see Jason pick off some kids, then this really isn't the movie for you. The thing I don't get about this, the thing that I find difficult to drop in on this movie is that if you've never seen a Friday the 13th movie, you understand Jason. He's a guy in a hockey mask with a machete who kills inappropriate teens. That's his whole MO. That's all you need to know wrapped up in one sentence. But the things that you need to know about Freddy Krueger in the Nightmare on Elm Street series are more ingrained. There are references here that you need to know the Nightmare on Elm Street series to understand. Like knowing who Freddy Krueger is, where he comes from, where he gets his powers, as he has powers that need to be explained in some way, whereas Jason doesn't. He's just kind of vaguely supernatural. There's also certain drugs that are of use and helpful in combating Freddy Krueger that come up in this movie that you need to understand the history of. You can't just name drop them. And they don't do a very good job in this movie of bringing you up to speed on the things you don't know about Freddy. So as a Jason Voorhees fan, as a fan of Friday the 13th, you can drop right in on this one and enjoy your Jason action, but you're going to be a little bit out to sea if you don't know anything about Freddy Krueger. So here we have it. We've come to the final movie in the series. This is Friday the 13th 11, and this is the most recent version of the film. This came out 13 years ago in 2009 and stars, of note, Jared Padalecki of Supernatural fame. Does he live? Does he die? I'm not going to tell you. I will give you a brief rundown of how many movies this movie is. Now, it opens much like the second movie did, with a recap of the ending of the first movie, or in this case, the first story, being a counselor who beheads Jason's mother. In this case, who's played by Nana Visitor, who played Major Kira Nerys in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I'm really glad to see her, if only in a couple bit parts. The only other thing I've ever seen her in is as a dying cancer patient in Battlestar Galactica, which was still cool that she got to have a role that was more than phoning in the emotions. She did a good job in that episode, and I think she does a halfway decent job in the couple of seconds of screen time she gets on this one. Anyways, starts off with the beginning of the second movie, which is the end of the first movie, moves on to the second movie with Jason in the pillowcase, then moves on a little bit further to the third movie with Jason finding a hockey mask. Meanwhile, we're introduced to a character who's out searching for his missing sister, who is a direct reference to that same character in the fourth movie. And from there's also some departures from the series that I'm not going to go into, except to say that I would compare this movie less to the supernatural slasher genre and more to the hillbilly horror genre. This movie takes more than a few cues from movies like The Hills Have Eyes and The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, both notably remade in kind of the same vein compared to their originals. And it just seems to me that they dwell on Jason being a part of this community who's kind of protected and steered clear of by the locals, who know what's going on and aren't really doing anything about it. And also this one kind of shows a little bit more of Jason's day-to-day life, which I think is weird, which forces us to ask questions about where does he sleep, what does he eat, how does he get around. It answers some questions that don't need answering, which is just a little bit of a misstep for me. The other thing this movie does that I find rather annoying is that it shows him out in the open, in the daylight, killing people. This is a slasher series where people are killed mercilessly in the dark of night, and I just find it odd to see him out there in the blazing sunlight murdering irresponsible teenagers. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. Maybe I want my half-naked teenagers to be half in the dark so that the actresses don't have to go around stigmatized for having been nude in a movie at the beginning of their career. But I digress. Is it fun? Yes. Is it my favorite? No. Is it something that I'll watch every once in a while? Yeah, if it comes around to I haven't seen it in a while and I can't remember what happened, I'd be happy to put it on, but that's really as far as it gets me. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this recap of the Friday the 13th series. Michael Myers and I here have been enjoying some of these cocktails. I'm going to have the recipe for both the Crystal Lake Swizzle and the Forest Green Swizzle down below in the comments. And if you have anything that you want to say about this video, about this cocktail, or maybe some other video series you want to do, I can certainly take those under advisement. Please leave those in the comments below. I am considering doing a Drink the Movies series for James Bond next, at some point, being the next kind of movie video. But if you want to see more horror, more action, anything, I'll see if I'm game to do it, and you'll be the first ones to know if it starts to happen. So I'm going to wish you all a safe and happy Friday the 13th to all my viewers out there in YouTube land. And I'm going to hope that you have something cold in your hand, something warm for your mouth, and something scary for you to watch tonight to scare away the boogeyman. So, cheers, and I will see you next time on Cocktail Corner.